But what happens, like when you have a brain injury like that? What's going on? Why does your oxygen level decrease? And really, what's happening?
Good question. So, when you have a brain injury, whether it's ischemic stroke sort of thing, where it's a blatant reduction in blood flow and oxygen, or whether it's another sort of brain injury, what happens is obviously the brain tries to protect itself. And one of the things it does in the healing process is it generates inflammation.
Welcome to Take Back My Brain with Laurie Hammer, where real healing starts in the brain. I'm Laurie, a functional nutritionist and mom who's walked the path from anxiety and burnout to clarity and calm. Each week, we're going to dive into brain-based tools like amino acid therapy, gut health, fasting, and faith to help you reclaim your energy, emotions, and sense of self. Hey, welcome back to the podcast. So today, you want to stay to the end because this is going to be a phenomenal interview. Because if you've heard of hyperbaric oxygen, and we're not going to talk about that today, so stay tuned. What if there was a simpler, more accessible way to flood your cells with oxygen while moving your body? And you all know I am always talking about moving your body for brain health. That is exactly what exercise with oxygen therapy does. It's called EWAT. And today we had Brad Pitzele joining us, and he's going to unpack exactly what is that and how it can impact your body from head to toe. So, Brad, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me, Lori.
It's great to have you on. And you have an incredible, like personal story. Like you had strange medical conditions. You were diagnosed with arthritis and malignant melanoma. By the way, I was diagnosed with melanoma back in 2007. So I understand that. And Lyme disease. And you've discovered, like, I don't know what say the secret, but you've discovered what oxygen and light therapy can do to the body. And those are just basic foundations that God created in the beginning, oxygen and light, and we kind of forget about them. So I
Yeah.
am so excited to dive into this, hear your story, and talk about the life changing things that are happening with oxygen therapy and red light.
Awesome. I'm excited to share.
Awesome. So I would love to hear, how did this all get started for you?
Yeah, I had weird medical things going on most of my life. I'd have like symptoms that would pop up. We'd go to the doctor, they'd give it a name. There was no treatment for whatever the thing was, and it would kind of go away. And then 6 months or a year later, something different. But generally, I was in good health until about 15 ish years ago. I started to develop autoimmune arthritis.
Oh,
Yeah, and that was obviously a really difficult diagnosis. They started to put me on a variety of drugs. The initial drugs didn't work, and then they put me on more powerful drugs. Eventually, we found stuff that worked. It would make me feel better for about 6 months. Would
mm,
stop working. I'd find I was actually in worse health after it stopped working than before I got on it. They would double the dose. It would lift me up somewhat, probably not where I ever was before. And it was just
right.
kind of this stair step down. And I kept on that treadmill, I guess, until I got this diagnosis of melanoma. And the drugs I was on had a higher risk for cancer and specifically melanoma.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like a breaking point for me where I was like, I went back to my doctor and I said, what do I do? Do I continue on the drugs that possibly gave me cancer and expect
Right.
more cancer? Or do I get off them and, live this disabling life of increased autoimmune arthritis? And he didn't have a really good answer for me. He was
Yeah.
like, well, we'll just try another drug in the same class and cross our fingers sort of attitude. I was like, oh, I don't like
That's
either of
so
these
great.
paths. Neither one of them is going well. I had young children, I was a father, and I'm like, neither of these seems like that story ends like they played in
Yeah, that's not a good
Hollywood. So
option. Yeah. No, thank you.
yeah, is there another movie? Is there another version of this story? So
Right.
I started like just doing a bunch of research and trying different things, and nothing was working. Diet, supplements, all sorts of different modalities. Eventually, I got to a doctor and he said, "I want to test you for Lyme." And I kind of laughed inside. I'm like, I never was bit by a tick. I didn't have that bullseye rash. I didn't have any Lyme. I'll pay it was expensive for this test. I said,
Yeah, it
I'll
is
pay.
expensive.
Yeah, it was like a $500 test. And I was like, I'll pay the $500 just so the doctor can get himself over this Lyme disease idea and we can get on and figure out what the real thing was. Well, it came back positive and I still didn't believe it. And I went back to him. I was like, what's the chance of a false positive? And he goes, well, let me put it to you this way. You had the DNA of the Lyme bacteria in your urine. What do you think? Like, oh,
It might be positive.
okay. I guess I'll accept that. By the time it was discovered, though, I mean, I had so many problems. I had brain fog, neurological things. I had backs of my legs were super stiff.
Wow.
I could barely walk. Bottoms of my feet felt. The best way I could describe it to people is they felt like they'd been beaten with a meat hammer. Every
Yeah.
step was excruciating, and there's like maybe two pairs of shoes that made it slightly
Mm.
tolerable. Mm, No energy, just so many. I mean, probably 87 different symptoms if I were to catalog them all. It was kind of
Sure.
rough,
Yeah, it sounds really rough.
but that doctor started talking to me about mitochondrial health and the role oxygen plays in that, and that he's kind of the gentleman who helped bring me out of that cascade, that downward spiral, if you will.
Mhm. And so when did you start using oxygen therapy?
Um, I guess it would have been about 2016, so about a decade now ago.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. So what happened when you started using oxygen therapy?
Well, the first thing is the context is nothing ever worked for me, right? So I would be in these groups and talking to other people who had Lyme disease or autoimmune or
Yeah.
anything. They said, "This is the thing," and I'd go do the thing, and I'm like, "Nothing." And then people would be
Yeah.
like, in the Lyme community, if you do a treatment and it like kills Lyme, often it'll give you something that they call die off, which just
Yeah.
feels like you're really hungover and
Yep.
you need to detoxify. And so I was like excited to find anything that would cause die off. Nothing ever would, antibiotics didn't do it. Nothing did. So he had me start this. I ended up starting doing oxygen, and probably for the first 3 months, I didn't notice anything. I'll be honest. Now, most of our customers who do it, some of them will tell you they notice something on the first time, certainly within a few weeks, sort of thing. I'm like on the very tail end. I'm like this total non-responder to anything. And about the third month, I probably only noticed because I was like symptom cataloging, and I was like, holy cow. I no longer have 50. What happened to these 12 symptoms? They've been gone for a while. They didn't just blink out and blink back in. But I started to notice I got more energy and I was more clear headed. And some of the aches and pains and weird stuff started to dissipate.
Interesting. So did you start with the exogen oxygen therapy or did you start with like hyperbaric or something else?
I started with exercise with oxygen therapy
You
right out
did.
of the
Okay.
gate. The doctor recommended I do one of these two and either do exercise with oxygen therapy, EWAT, or do
Mhm.
hyperbaric oxygen. And so, of course, I picked hyperbaric because I'd heard of it.
Right.
And then I looked at the price tag and how much the time commitment, and it wasn't realistic for me. They wanted me to be in a chamber for an hour and a half a day, seven
Yep.
days a week. The price was going to be $50,000 to $75,000 if I flew out to Florida to do it. If I did it here in Dallas, it was going to be more expensive. And I was like,
Wow.
that's a lot of money on an experiment when every experiment failed. And I can't, you know, it's not just the hour and a half in the tube, it's driving to a doctor's office and back, pressurizing and depressurizing that chamber. It was going to be like 3 hours. I was like, I can't keep my job and spend 3 hours,
Right.
out of commission each day. It's just not realistic. So that quickly got eliminated and I moved over and started focusing on EWA.
That's amazing. So explain to people what EWAT is.
Yeah. So EWAT stands for exercise with oxygen therapy, and it's just like it sounds. You do exercise while you're breathing near pure oxygen. So what this looks like is you'd be doing, like, let's say you'll do a 15-minute cardiovascular session, and you'll have a mask on your face. Actually, I have a mask right here. You have one of these masks on your face, and you breathe. It's got a hose hooked up to it that you breathe near pure oxygen. 93%. And so in hyperbaric oxygen, just as a comparison, what happens is you get in a tube and they pressurize it and pump in this near pure oxygen. And all of that pressure forces more oxygen through your lungs and into your bloodstream.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and of course, once the oxygen gets on the other end of your lung membrane, that pressure from the hyperbaric chamber isn't doing a whole lot. And what I mean by that is if you were to look at your blood pressure and you were in one of these hyperbaric chambers that has, 2.3 atmospheres, so 2.3 times the amount of pressure as you feel at normal sea level, your blood pressure isn't going up 2.3 times, thankfully, right? It's
Right.
because the lung membrane holds that pressure back. So all of the work hyperbaric does is just getting more oxygen through your lungs.
Mm-hmm.
In exercise with oxygen therapy, I describe it as we're hijacking all the physiological changes that happen during exercise. So when you exercise, your body is basically has all these changes that allow it to intake more oxygen and distribute more of it. So, you're breathing faster and deeper, your lungs actually thin out so more oxygen can diffuse through them. Your heart beats faster and deeper, your blood vessels dilate, all these changes. So we're kind of just taking advantage of those and you're breathing near pure oxygen. And so in a 15-minute EWAT session, you can take in as much oxygen as you would in like 90 minutes in a hard shell hyperbaric chamber. It's a
Oh,
massive amount of oxygen. It's like the same amount of oxygen you would use in basically a full day.
wow. So is there any downside to taking in that much oxygen, that pure oxygen that quickly?
There really isn't when you're doing EWAT. So there is
Okay.
something known as oxygen toxicity. So divers who are diving long time under high pressures undersea for a long time,
Yeah.
they can get oxygen toxicity. What happens in oxygen toxicity is the oxygen, it gets trapped inside your circulatory system and it can't get out. But when you're doing exercise with oxygen therapy, you cannot get oxygen toxicity for a couple of reasons. One is we fill this large 1,000-liter reservoir, and as I mentioned, it's about the same amount of oxygen you'd use in a day. Well, that's still not enough to get oxygen toxicity when you're at normal pressures.
Okay.
And then second is, even if it were infinitely large, you still couldn't get oxygen toxicity because when you're exercising, you're producing a massive amount of carbon dioxide gas, your
Mm-hmm.
exhale gas, and that actually creates pressure inside your circulatory system that
Oh,
forces the oxygen out. So it's a very safe therapy as long as you're healthy enough for exercise.
I love it. So who does this benefit?
Yeah, we have so many. So I started this company to help folks with chronic health conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And we're helping people with so many chronic health conditions because at the root of it, one of the things I discovered is anywhere in your body you have inflammation, you have low oxygen, you have oxygen
Yeah.
starvation. And anywhere you have oxygen starvation, you have inflammation. Those two coexist everywhere there's inflammation. And as you know, Lori, like everywhere, any chronic disease has inflammation at its root.
Yeah.
So we have folks using this. We have them using it for all sorts of brain health things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's,
Mhm.
post concussion, post stroke. We have people using it to help with cancer, to help with autoimmunity, to help with chronic infections like Lyme disease or long COVID, and just so many other things. And people are just using it for its anti-aging and wellness benefits as well.
Hey, friend, just a quick break to remind you if calming your brain is the missing piece in your practice or in your home, my Mind Thrive certification course teaches you exactly how to do that with targeted amino acid therapy. So it's real science, real results, no band aids. Enrollment is now open. Link is in the show notes. So back to the show. Gotcha. Well, before we got on here, I was telling you I've only had very limited experience with EWAT, but the one time that my daughter, who's we're post concussion 3 years now, and she still has some challenges. So her one eye looks like it has a cotton ball through it. Like when she sees, she's like the middle looks like a cotton ball, and haven't been able to heal that up. And so we were at a friend's clinic and he's like, "Hey, just try this EWAT, try this." And she got on the bike, she put on the mask and she did it for like 15 minutes. And she got off. She's like, "My eye has not felt or seen this good in the last 3 years.
I love it.
So just that deeper, would you call it saturation of oxygen?
It is.
Was amazing, like, a healing tool for her eye. Now, this is something we're gonna like, we were talking, I said, "I need to purchase one of these so we can do it at home because, there isn't any place around us that has this, and it's relatively affordable for sure."
Yeah.
So, I'm super excited to have this conversation, but what happens, like, when you have a brain injury like that? What's going on? Why does your oxygen level decrease, and really what's happening?
It's a good question. So when you have a brain injury, whether it's ischemic stroke sort of thing, where it's a blatant reduction in blood flow and oxygen, or whether it's another sort of brain injury, what happens is obviously the brain tries to protect itself. And one of the things it does in the healing process is it generates inflammation. Now, what happens in inflammation is there's actually some really interesting research that started EWAT that's really
Okay.
relevant here, which is a gentleman named Manfred von Ardeen back in the 1960s and 70s. This guy's a really prolific inventor. He invented like the scanning electron microscope, and he
Oh,
was
wow.
involved with the commercialization of the original television sets in the 90s. So he started to focus on oxygen, and he was looking at oxygen and exercise. And one of the things he found is as we get older, we lose the ability to utilize oxygen about
Hmm.
1% a year for every year past the age of 25. And part of the reason for that is the linings of our blood vessels, they're lined with cells called endothelial cells. And these endothelial cells, they become inflamed as well. And in your capillaries are thinner than a human hair. They're
Mhm.
really tiny. These are the end runs of your circulatory system where the
Right.
blood and the oxygen and nutrients get delivered to the tissues, including the brain. Now, when these things start to swell, they actually swell shut where no red blood cells can get by.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So red blood cells are actually larger than the capillaries themselves in a healthy human being. They always are. And the only way they're able to get into these capillaries is they deform. They kind of fold up like a taco to fit inside these capillaries. But two things happen with this inflammation. One, the endothelial cells swell shut so they no longer have room. And the red blood cells themselves become more rigid with inflammation. So they no
Okay.
longer can fold up. So now all of these cells downstream go, the fancy science term is they go hypoxic, which means they're oxygen starved.
Right.
So now they don't get oxygen. Luckily, our body has two ways to produce energy. One is aerobic respiration using oxygen. The other is anaerobic, where it can produce energy without oxygen. So the cells become anaerobic.
Hmm.
And when your cells become anaerobic, the first problem with that is an anaerobic cell produces 20 times less energy than an aerobic cell. So
Wow.
it's a massive decrease in energy.
Massive.
Now, if
Mhm.
you're this cell and you just lost 95% of your energy source, you're in like survival mode. So
Mhm.
you stop taking out the trash and detoxifying. And that's a bigger problem because anaerobic respiration produces a massive amount of metabolic waste compared to aerobic respiration. So lactic
Right.
acid, metabolic waste are building up inside the cell wall. You stop doing even some of your core functions well. You're just kind of trying to get by, and you no longer have the energy to repair, regenerate, etc. You're just trying to survive. And so when we have injuries so we already have this inflammation in our circulatory system. And then you have an insult or an injury, and particularly in the brain, because the brain uses 20% of all of our oxygen. It's about
Okay.
it's about 2% of our mass and 20% of our oxygen utilization. So it's an incredibly oxygen hungry organ
Mhm.
and very oxygen dependent. So now you have an injury, it's causing inflammation that's adding to all of this circulatory issues, and it's causing a lack of oxygen delivery. Lack of oxygen delivery is creating toxins building up inside the cell walls. They're not working as well. They're not able to regenerate and repair, and they're just trying to get by. And so now you've got this injured and damaged tissue, and it can't even think about fixing itself. It's just trying, it's just trying to make it through the day, so to speak. And so it becomes kind of this self reinforcing thing because these these cells that are in the survival mode are also producing all these acids and metabolic waste, which are causing more damage, which is causing more inflammation. So it becomes kind of this circular loop.
Right.
Now, what von Arden discovered in the 1960s and 70s, which is really the birth of EWAT, was that when you had folks do even just a few sessions, like your daughter noticed, it creates this profoundly anti-inflammatory impact on the circulatory system. So now your capillaries reopen up, and now the red blood cells are able to start getting through there. But it also does something else that's really kind of cool. So our blood is made up of several components: white blood cells, red blood cells, which are the primary oxygen carrying vehicle, and then there's blood plasma.
Mm-hmm.
And blood plasma is like this clearish brown liquid. It's mostly water, and it's what the red and white blood cells ride on.
Okay.
Um,
It's the stuff you donate when you're poor in college.
what's that?
It's the stuff you donate when you're
That's right.
poor in
It
college.
is. And we don't want to know what you did with that money.
We don't want to know, but just know that that's that I did it. So I go ahead.
Yep. Yep. So the blood plasma, it carries all your nutrients and other things besides oxygen, but it normally doesn't carry very much oxygen. It maybe carries like 2 or 3% of all the oxygen you have in your blood. But when you breathe a massive amount of oxygen, like you're doing in EWAT, there's something called Henry's Law, which basically states that gases that normally couldn't go into solution into this blood plasma under normal circumstances, under these special circumstances, can saturate this plasma. So now we've increased the oxygen carrying capacity of your blood, but it's even greater than that because blood plasma is like 1,000 times thinner than a red blood cell. So we talked about these choked off capillaries. We now are, even before we have that anti-inflammatory effect, we can get plasma through those small openings and to all those cells because we're still delivering food and nutrients to them, just not oxygen. But now we're delivering with those food and nutrients oxygen that's in the plasma. And so
Wow.
we immediately reoxygenate them, and then we create this anti-inflammatory effect. So when you're not doing EWAT, you're still delivering oxygen to these cells. And so it's like bringing them back online.
Wow. So tell the audience like what kind of success stories you have with like specific like brain injury kind of things.
You know, one of my favorite brain injury ones was a gentleman who had concussions, and he came to us and he had concussions, and he was a tax preparer. And he would describe how in the afternoons he would become very foggy. He couldn't think straight, and he would get angry, right? Which is pretty typical of people with some of these brain injuries. He would lose control of his emotions and they would kind of flare. And so it was very difficult for a job like that, high cognitive load,
Right.
obviously. And so the first time he did it, he did a session, and then he called and said, "Hey, that was amazing." He's like, "After my first session, I felt clear-headed for the first time for the rest of the day." He's like, he didn't do it the next day, and he said he kind of fell back to baseline. And the day
Hmm.
after he did it, he was back, and it was a great afternoon. But over a series of just a few sessions, he was like, it got to the point where it would last me 2 days. And, like, I felt great in between sessions, so I wasn't having
Wow.
any, you know. And then my favorite story of his was he said, like, he was a couple weeks in, and he was in Texas, and he had to go out to Florida for a business conference. And he told me a story how he was, like, looking around for an oxygen bar, trying to make sure he got oxygen because he was freaked about the idea that he
Wow.
might flip backwards sort of thing. Now, oxygen bar is not gonna give you the same sort of benefits, but his was pretty profound and pretty quick. I don't know why I couldn't have had that quick of a response, I wish, but I also like, my brain fog was in like, I know this intimately because I was there, like, my brain fog was horrible. I was abusing caffeine as much as I could. There's, like, that small window where I could get enough caffeine where I felt like my head got above the clouds,
Yeah.
and, like, a sip later, I was, like, in jittery land and useless. But that small window was like,
Small window.
I lived for those, like, 10 minutes of, like, clarity, so to speak, when I could get them on certain days. And it was so hard, I was in these meetings and I just couldn't listen to what people were saying, and they'd ask me a question, and I was trying to, like, fumble around and say something that I
Yeah.
sounded cogent. But I mean, it's amazing how much it can help. I mean, oxygen, if you're I mean, and there's a lot of research actually on EWAT for like memory and cognitive performance. So it's not just, us things we've heard. There's actually been
Right.
some really good research because EWAT's beyond being used for wellness benefits. It's also used for sports performance benefits. And a lot of
Yeah.
like the US Olympic teams and others have used them and done a bunch of research on sports performance and memory and decision making and all that sort of stuff. So really helps there. We've had folks who are using it for Alzheimer's, some really good stories I've
Yeah.
seen there. There's a really well-known doctor, Dr. Bredesen,
Hmm.
and he's got what he calls the RECODE protocol, which stands for reversing cognitive decline. And they've started to incorporate EWAT in the last few years into that program. And they've done some measurements. I know one of the doctors there did some like blood measurements to look at, blood markers before and after, and that was pretty interesting as well.
Yeah. Have you seen a profound difference with like anxiety, depression, OCD, ADHD kind of things?
Um, yeah, we've certainly with, ADHD with focusing, I've heard some of that. More impact I have heard on depression and anxiety, definitely. So, you know, at the root of it, when you're in a depressive state, you're kind of in a low energy state, right? You're
Right.
like
Yeah.
by its nature. And so the reverse is actually true when you can bring more energy into the body, it makes you feel more alive. It makes
Oh,
you,
yeah.
and I've seen it in so many folks. I know, like, yeah, I know personally, I dealt with a lot of that in the depths of kind of when I was really sick too. So
Right. And I would assume that it really boosts your immune system. So if you're struggling from Lyme disease or Epstein-Barr or post-COVID or, all those kind of things that would be beneficial as well.
in multiple ways, it is. Yes, it boosts the immune system a few different ways directly, and then of course a lot of these infectious agents can't live in an oxygen rich environment. Lyme is one of those where it literally creates oxygen depletion wherever it's living in the body. So when you restore oxygenation, because what happens is low oxygen drives inflammation.
Right.
Inflammation drives damage. Damaged tissue is easier to infect, and the immune system's weaker where all that inflammation is going on and it's busy trying to repair the damage. And so these infectious agents can live in those environments. And so when you kind of change the terrain, you actually make it inhospitable.
I love that. I love that so much. And it's just oxygen, right? It's
Exactly
just
right.
oxygen. So how long did you have to go before you're like, oh yeah, this stuff is making a huge difference in my life? Because you're the fringe people, right?
Yeah.
That
Yes.
it takes so much more.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't take much pride in that.
Right, we
But
don't want you to be that way, but that's just kind of the way it is.
yeah, yeah, I am definitely that. I said for me, it probably took 3 months to notice. Some of that was probably I also kind of block a lot of it out. In order, like I was in a survival mode where it's like I couldn't pay attention and ride the roller
Yeah.
coaster up and down on each symptom, and I just had to kind of march forward. But by 3 months, there was a very noticeable difference in my change. And then by a year, I remember when I went back in to check in with the doctor, he was shocked at how different I was. He didn't ask me a word before I said, "Wow, you're looking better." Like it was that noticeable. And his next question was, are you working on your mitochondrial health? And I was like, yes. And he's like, well, what tools are you using? And when I described the oxygen, he asked if I would start making them for his patients at that moment. He was
Yeah.
like, that's how impactful my change was to him. And that was actually the birth of the company. So within a year, I noticed, you know, and then the interesting thing is, I noticed beyond just like recovery from sickness, general wellness and improvements in my well being continued into like my third year.
Sure.
That's kinda shocking to me because imagine you're, like, sedentary and you decided to just start exercising, and
Mhm.
you do the same exercise a few times a week. You'd figure by the time you get to 3 and 6 months, you kinda plateau, right? Like, your
Right?
body's used to it.
Yeah.
It's so much different with this, and it was, like, kinda shocking that, like, I'm like, "Holy cow, I've" like just kept getting better and better, so to speak, beyond what I would call my baseline to like a
Right.
level that I wouldn't have expected to recover to.
Well, and I think people don't really understand that. Like you were so committed and so consistent with, your healing modalities. And sometimes it takes a really long time for the body to respond. And so you go through and your company's called, 1000 roads. You're going through those 1000 roads. You're like, what the why is nothing working for me? And it's just being super consistent. Like, you know, and you haven't tried everything, right? Let's go back to the basics. And we're going to talk about red light therapy here shortly, too. Like light therapy and oxygen therapy and getting in the sunshine and hydration and salt and
Right?
just basic amino acids and all those kind of things. Like sometimes it just takes your body a long time to really respond and repair. It can't detox until it feels safe enough to detox. It can't release things or go to the next level until it feels safe at the level that you're at.
You're right.
And that's one of the biggest things. And so dedication to your health, it's a long-term thing. Like I feel better at 52 than I did at 42.
Yeah,
Like I'm just so consistent with my health and you can't let up, you know?
you're absolutely right. Yeah, it is, and I think like one of the things that drew me to these modalities, what I always described like when I was sick with Lyme, you're trying all these different things, and I
Yeah.
always said the hardest part about one of the hardest parts about having Lyme is what I refer to as the ceremonies. Every night I'm
Mm,
counting the pills for tomorrow, and then you're spending this much time doing an Epsom salt bath or in a
yeah.
sauna or in and each one of them seemed reasonable, but then you stacked it and you found you're spending 4 and 6 out, and it's like, how can I like literally I can't, even if I can do all this, there's no time left for me. By the end
Right.
of the day, I feel better and then I go to sleep and I start over again.
And you have a family.
Yeah, and then you just kind of throw your hands up and you say, "You know what? I can't do it. I'm just giving up," sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I saw that so much, and I've felt that myself many a time. But what was good about this is like EWAT's something you can do in your home, 15 minutes a day. And to your point, it does a variety of things. It improves your immune system, it improves your energy level, like not just your alertness energy level, but like at a cellular level, which means all your systems can do their job at better. It improves your detoxification. Actually, oxygen is critical for detoxification.
Yeah.
That's rarely talked about. Actually, 80% of our detoxification happens through our lungs. Um, and the rest of it requires oxygen to break down and oxidize complex chemicals into something simpler our elimination
Yeah.
organs can handle. And so it was like one of those where it was like a no-brainer for me because I could find time to do it. And it was like it's 15 minutes is something you can find. That's the problem. I think hyperbaric's really good for certain folks and for certain situations, but
Mhm.
it's more of a heroic thing. You can go do it for a week or a month and a half, but can you really spend 60 to 90 minutes in a hyperbaric chamber consistently over time? That's a difficult hill for most of us to climb. And
Yeah.
that's same with a lot of protocols, but I couldn't agree with you more that it does become difficult with time to manage all of the ceremonies as they call them.
Yeah, for sure. So with EWAT, can you use it like on a bike and a rowing machine? Like what do you how do you use it best?
Yeah, you can basically I recommend that folks use any piece of exercise equipment
Treadmill?
that they prefer best because as I said, like if you're gonna we want you to do it for the long haul. We want you to do it a few times a week, 3 to 5 times a week in perpetuity, quite frankly. And most folks, they get through a year of it and they're like, I'll never stop this. It's just the benefits are for the amount of time it just I would never want to stop it. But
Does the exercise have to be at a certain level or can you sit there and just use EWAT? I mean,
it's a great
like
question.
like those little pedals for old people,
Yep.
like
So
what level of exercise do you have to have?
I love that's a great question. So we have folks who span the spectrum. Obviously, we've got these folks who are using performance maximization.
Yeah.
Then we have 80-year-old folks with Alzheimer's and balance issues,
Okay.
who so it will modulate to you. And then one of the cool things let's just say you were exercising today, and then you put on the mask. The very first benefit you notice from EWAT is the exercise gets immediately easier. You can do more with less perceived effort when you're breathing the oxygen. So a lot of folks who don't think they can do stuff find they can do more with the oxygen mask on. But we have folks who will start slow walking on a treadmill, stretching in calisthenics, using, like you were talking about, those little under desk pedal bikes, even jumping on a rebounder. And
Okay.
then it will quickly also help you improve your athletic endurance, like, faster than just the exercise alone would. And so
Right.
as your endurance improves and your capabilities improve, it's naturally easier to do more. And we just tell folks, the goal is to start where you're at, and then
Yeah.
let the EWAT help you increase your endurance and do more over time.
Love it. I love it. I love it. And so you also incorporate red light therapy. So let's dive into that. If you're watching on YouTube, I know you're going to be, his head's like glowing with red light. I have my red light on all the time. I love light therapy, laser therapy, red light therapy, oxygen. Like it's all so healing and it's just all such basic stuff. So tell me why you love red light therapy.
Well, EWAT and red light therapy work wonderful together. They both target mitochondrial health at their basis. So we
So
talked about,
before you go on, like, would you like put a red light panel while you're doing your exercise and doing the EWAT? Like, can you do that?
you can do that,
Okay.
but what we normally have folks do is do EWAT and then immediately after do red light. And
Ah, gotcha.
I'll
Okay.
explain to you why. There's a good reason for it. It's pretty
Okay.
cool. So we talked a little bit about the science of oxygen utilization. And as we get older, we lose the ability to utilize oxygen. But then we go do EWAT and it helps reestablish more youthful oxygenation. And we're using that blood plasma to increase oxygen carrying capabilities of the blood. So now what we've done is we've reestablished oxygenation to a bunch of our cells. And we've got an excess supply of oxygen right when we get done with EWAT. Now, what red light does, the benefits of red light come from it stimulating the mitochondria, which are the little organelles inside our cells that use oxygen to produce energy. So, first, we do EWAT to create a massive supply of oxygen inside of our circulatory system. And then we use red light, which what it does is it stimulates the mitochondria to increase oxygen demand.
Okay.
So, when red and near infrared light hit our cells and our mitochondria, it causes, through a cascade of, fancy terms, to effectively cause the mitochondria to pull in more oxygen and produce more energy. So when you read about benefits of red light therapy, whether it be cognitive benefits or skin and collagen benefits or bone and healing benefits, they all come from the same place. They're programming our cells to produce more energy from the mitochondria
Okay.
by increasing oxygen demand. First, we start with oxygen demand. We increase the oxygen supply in the system, and then immediately after we do red light, and that increases the oxygen demand. So now we're taking more of that oxygen and converting it into energy, so that our
Wow.
cells have more energy to repair, reproduce, etc.
That's amazing. That's just
Yeah.
like, that's on steroids.
Yeah, it's really cool, and they partner so well because as you think about it, EWAT's from what I call from the inside out. You start
Uh-huh.
breathing it from your circulatory system out to your cells, and then red lights from the outside in, and it also causes some vasodilation, blood vessels getting bigger, and some increase in circulation. So you get done with EWAT, you already have higher circulation, and it maintains higher circulation for a longer period of time. And it's helping drive more of that oxygen and that blood plasma deeper where it needs to go into the circulatory system and the tissues.
I love it. I love it. So red light therapy. So there's red, there's infrared, also other sorts of light spectrums. But what's going to be the best one for somebody who wants to use it? Like 3 to 4 times a week for what we've been talking about.
Well, I recommend a combination of both. And here's the reason why. The reason why red light and near infrared light therapy is necessary is because it's something we're starved of. If we
Okay.
go back to away from modern times, we spent a lot of time outdoors where the sun provided those spectrum for us. And when we moved indoors with artificial lighting, we purposefully screen out red and near infrared light spectrum. The reason is they're not very energy efficient. Near
Mm,
infrared is experienced by the body as heat. No one wants to heat the room up with the light. Whereas The blue lights and the yellow lights make it easier to read and see things. So for the striving for energy efficiency, we've cut these spectrum out, and we spend all this time indoors being starved of red and near infrared. So part of it's about reestablishing that natural balance that we were given. Now, the difference between red and near infrared is really what they target. The difference is really targeting depth. So red light generally tends to focus more on the skin and
Hmm.
subskin levels. Near infrared will target deeper tissues. It will go deeper into the brain and the organs and everything else. But obviously, when you pair them together, you're getting both of those benefits. You're extending the oxygen utilization benefits to all the cells in our body so that we can be at our best.
That is awesome. Man, this is such a great conversation. So tell the folks what you have available for them.
Sure. So we sell EWAT systems. We sell two different systems. They both produce the same benefits. Really, one is about faster, making the machine ready for use faster. It's generally the one you pick if you've got multiple users. It has a longer life because it's the machine itself runs for half as much time for each time you use it. But both of them will give you the exact same benefits. Really, we started the company on trying to make these technologies affordable for people so they could
Yeah.
experience them in their homes. Um, and then we also sell red light panels. We have three different ones. We have two panels that are generally for full body. So they cover a large swath of your skin and your surface area. So you're getting systemic benefits. It's targeting a large amount of tissue at once. And then we sell a smaller panel, which is really for spot treatment. So if
Okay.
you're just interested, for instance, in brain health, and that was it, and you didn't care about the other stuff, you could use it for that. Or if you had a joint that hurt, you could use it
Yeah.
for that, etc.
Okay. That's awesome. And now finish telling the listeners about your recovery. Like you look amazing and you feel good right now. So how did
Yeah.
it all end up for you?
It's been pretty amazing. Like I said, probably a year in, I felt a lot better. By 2 years, I was back to myself. And by 3 years, I was shocked that I was better than I really could have ever imagined being. I had an aha moment a few years ago. I was running this business at the time. I was doing it part time and I had a full time job. I was helping start a second business, and I was my children's assistant wrestling coach. And I was
Okay.
at one of their tournaments. I'm like, how did I get here? Like I
Right.
was faking it to make it at work. I didn't have the energy to get through a day. And it's kind of your
Right.
point about feeling better today than you did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, every year since then, when someone makes a joke at your birthday or whatever, it's like, oh, you're this. How does it feel? I'm like, better than it did when I was 35.
Yeah. Yeah. Like aging is amazing.
Yeah, you're like I always tell folks I'm aging in reverse in the
Yes.
sense that like my capabilities are so much better than they were then. Um, I guess the message I would tell to your listeners, anyone who's dealing with health challenges, is maintain hope. There is an opportunity. If you can be hopeful and curious and looking for something that will help you, you can get there. Our body is amazing. It's got amazing capabilities to heal. Was in an incredibly difficult, low, lonely spot when I was at my lowest.
Yeah.
And I would to have gotten 40% of the way to where I am today at that point would have been a miracle to me, to be quite honest with you. Um, but today I have my health back. I no longer have issues that functionally affect me in any way, shape, or form, really.
That's amazing. God is so good, right? Amen. The body can do amazing things if we just remove those interferences and give it what it needs. And oxygen and red light therapy is so key to what the body needs in every aspect. So, Brad, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for being on here. All of Brad's information will be in the show notes. So make sure you click on all his links and follow him. Check out his EWAT, his infrared, all of those, or his red light therapy and all those things. So we really, really appreciate you, Brad. Thanks for coming on today and sharing.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, everyone else, for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. God bless you. And I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to Take Back My Brain. If today's episode helped you connect with hope or direction, I want you to follow the show, leave us a review, and share it with someone who needs it. And if you're ready to start your own healing journey, explore our courses and our coaching programs at lauriehammer.com/store. So until next time, remember, you cannot medicate away a nutrient deficiency, and healing your brain isn't just possible, it's powerful.